If you were to ask me what's the single most important ability that every successful leader in Ladara needs to develop, the one skill that's the key to unlocking your success and enabling you to achieve nearly anything you want in life, my answer would be really simple and without hesitation. It's leadership. Now, I know that might sound like a lot of hype and exaggeration, but I can assure you it is not. Everything rises and falls on leadership. In fact, leadership is the single most important skill you can develop in helping you to build a large and successful Ladara business. Your level of leadership will dictate your ability to enroll other leaders into Ladara. And as we know, the more leaders you can attract, the faster your business grows. Leadership expert John Maxwell calls this the law of the lid. The law of the lid says this: leadership ability determines your level of effectiveness. And here's how it works. The lower an individual's ability to lead, the less success they're going to have. The higher the individual's ability to lead, the more success they're going to have. Now let's apply this to our Ladara business. If you've achieved the title of team leader or senior team leader or even senior team leader too, you've developed some level of leadership skills. I mean, after all, you're able to influence some people, and that's a great accomplishment. But if your goal is to achieve executive team leader, regional team leader, national team leader, 3-star global, and truly experience complete financial security and success in Ladara, you absolutely need to take your leadership skills to a whole nother level, because you'll be influencing thousands of marketing partners rather than just a few hundred. So how do I know that? Because ever since I was 15 years old, I've seen and intensely studied the impact leadership can have on an organization, both good and bad. I've seen that when I was growing up in my personal life. I've seen it in reading hundreds of books on leadership over the last 25 years, starting way back in 1990 when I was a student at Yale and I wrote a paper on leadership. And I've seen that over the last 20 years as I've gone from completely broke, $70,000 in debt, living on the second floor of a 3-family house with my new wife, doing door-to-door sales to make ends meet, and then went on over the next 20 years to build a company with well over $1 billion in sales, giving people the life of their dreams, which is really a dream come true for me. Now, I attribute that turnaround in my life to rigorous study and actively applying the laws of leadership. There is no doubt in my mind that leadership skills make all the difference in the world between great success enjoying your life versus complete failure and unhappiness. Now, my first real life lesson in leadership is a very personal one for me when I was a high school student, about 15 years old. You see, my parents were immigrants from Europe. They came over to the U.S. into the New York harbor after a 3-week journey on a boat in 1955 with 2 children, not knowing the English language, and no money. I mean, zero. You want to talk about a rough start? Now, I feel blessed that my parents took that big step, that scary, intimidating journey to cross the Atlantic on a boat and come to the U.S. so their kids could live the American dream. And, my parents worked really hard. They held several jobs at a time. Some were part-time, some were full-time. In fact, to me, it felt like they were working all the time. And in spite of that, we struggled quite a bit growing up financially. And, money was always an issue. We were always worried about money. We couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, we couldn't go to dinner, I couldn't go to this camp. Whatever it was, money, or really the lack of it, it seemed to really run our lives. But then things began to change a little bit when my dad got a great new job with the Chrysler Corporation. He was a pickpacker, and he would spend the day pushing around a cart, taking car parts off shelves and loading them onto a truck. And I know it was hard, monotonous work because I used to work there during the summers when I was in high school. So I know what he was doing each day. But, for us, it paid really well and the benefits were great. And my dad, he was really hardworking. He took every opportunity he could to work overtime because he would get paid, time and a half and sometimes double time. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, he was making about $8 an hour. and time and a half would be about $12 an hour, and double time, he would sometimes make as much as $16 an hour. So my dad was bringing home some serious dough back then. And we were just so grateful for the Chrysler Corporation and the job my dad had. But then in the early 80s, the economy went south in a big, big way. You might remember, for those who are old enough, the unemployment rate went over 10%, and interest rates went through the roof. In fact, I remember going to the bank with my dad one day, and he got a $1,000 CD, which paid an interest rate of 15%. Can you imagine that? 15%? I mean, now what can you get? 1% if you're lucky, right? Well, so that was good, but at that time, the Chrysler Corporation, they were in trouble and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I remember those dark days and nights because my parents would have these hushed discussions late at night when I was upstairs in bed, and they would be talking about, what are we gonna do when Chrysler goes bankrupt and my dad's out of a job? And they had no idea how we were gonna make it financially if that happened. And it was a scary time for all of us, for me and for them. And it was just a tougher time. And my parents, they wanted to protect me from their concerns. And so they tried to hide it from me. But it was impossible because you could see the stress that they were going through each day and the sadness as things grew bleaker and bleaker for Chrysler. I mean, we would turn on the TV and the media would be predicting the imminent demise of Chrysler because they were losing millions of dollars a month. But then, out of nowhere, there was some good news. A man named Lee Iacocca, former president of the Ford Motor Company, was taking over as the chairman of Chrysler. And he had this uplifting vision for the company. And he shared that vision throughout the company, and he persuaded the US government to give Chrysler a big loan so they could make it. He reduced costs, and he spearheaded some great car innovations, which included the K car. And I remember we got our first K car, and we loved that car. And all these things that he did, they completely turned around the company, and they saved Chrysler from bankruptcy. And most importantly, for us, they saved my dad's job. And I remember the mood in our house, the shift in that mood. Gosh, it was dramatic, from one of doom and gloom to total relief and just happiness for all of us. Now, the turnaround of Chrysler is considered one of the most amazing business turnarounds of the century. And today, Chrysler is still flourishing. And although my dad has since passed away, my mom still gets a small pension check from Chrysler each month for $341. In fact, I was over her house the other day and I saw that check there. So just very, very exciting. And this lesson in leadership that I learned when I was just 15 years old, it taught me two really important things. Number one, the power of persistence. You see, what a lot of people don't remember is that Iacocca had recently been fired by the Ford Motor Company before he took over the chairmanship of Chrysler. So here he went from being fired from one company to turning around Chrysler and getting on the cover of Time magazine, and that all happened in a period of a few years. You see, he believed in himself, even when others didn't, and he never gave up on himself or the tens of thousands of Chrysler employees who counted on him to turn things around. Now, the second lesson I learned is that leadership makes all the difference in the world. One leader with courageous and bold leadership can totally transform an organization. You see, no one else in Chrysler rose to the top to take charge and fix it, but he did. And for me, in the early 80s, there was no better or more important leader than Lee Iacocca. The leading researcher in the world on leadership, his name is Professor Warren Bennis of USC, and he recently passed away last year at the age of 89. But he spent his entire career studying leaders. So what did he conclude after all those years of studying leadership? Well, here's what he said, quote, "If I have learned anything from my research, it is this: the factor that empowers the workforce and ultimately determines which organizations succeed or fail is the leadership of those organizations." And let me point out this, many people think of men when reflecting on great leaders. But in my experience, women are uniquely qualified to be leaders. In fact, I think Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of Great Britain, put it best. She said this: any woman who understands the problems of running a home will be nearer to understanding the problems of running a country. Love that quote. So let me give you a quick definition of leadership, and I think it's just really simple. Leadership has to do with getting things accomplished by acting through others. So why is this so important? It's important because you can't build a successful Ladara organization without acting through others. There's this great story about Napoleon Hill. You see, at the request of Andrew Carnegie, who was one of the richest men alive, Hill devoted 20 years of his life to a study of what made people successful. He interviewed the wealthiest and the mightiest individuals of his day, including people like Henry Ford and Theodore Roosevelt and Charles Schwab and George Eastman and Rockefeller and Edison and many others. And here was his key discovery: you cannot be successful alone. No successful individual became successful strictly by himself or by virtue of what he could do himself. Every single one of the successful individuals that Napoleon Hill interviewed had become successful through the help of others. So great leaders inspire others. In fact, it was our 6th president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, who wrote what I believe is the greatest leadership quote of all time, hands down. You ready for this? Quote, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader." Gosh, I love that quote. Inspiring others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. That's what leadership is all about. So here's the really good news. In fact, I would say this is the great news of the day. You ready? Great leadership can be learned. You see, great leaders aren't born. They're made through learning about leadership and applying leadership. Let me share with you a brief story I heard from leadership expert John Maxwell. There were these American tourists, and they were in this small, quaint European village, with the old buildings and the historic churches. And, they thought about, wow, how great this little town is. And they saw this old man sitting on a park bench. And they went over to him and they said, "Hey, do you live here?" And he said, yeah, he had lived there all his life. And they thought, well, great, can we ask you this question? We love this village so much. And he said, okay, what's your question? And they asked him, have any great men been born in this village? Well, the old man thought for a minute, and then he said, well, no, only babies. You see, greatness doesn't begin great. It begins as a baby and grows. Greatness is based on the decisions you make every single day. So becoming a great leader comes with a dedicated commitment to studying and learning about leadership on a consistent basis, through books, through audios, through videos like this. So make a commitment to learn about leadership every single day. You see, if you want to raise up great leaders in your group, you need to be a great leader, because like attracts like. If you want to have an A business, you've got to develop into an A leader. If you're only a C leader, you're not going to attract A or B leaders to your group. You're only going to attract D's and F's. So you need to become an A leader. There's a great quote from James Allen, who wrote the classic As a Man Thinketh. And here's what he said: people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but they're not anxious to improve themselves. Therefore, they remain bound. Don't remain bound. Who wants to remain bound for the rest of their life? And, I know you don't, because you want to improve your circumstances, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this video. So be anxious to improve yourself. Spend at least 15 minutes each day in leadership development or any type of personal development. You see, learners become the big earners. Never forget that phrase. The learners become the big earners. So spend at least a quarter of an hour each day learning, and watch your business and your income soar. Day by day, you're going to get better and better and better. And I call this concept CANI, C-A-N-I, constant and never-ending improvement. A little improvement every day over time eventually turns into massive success. And it's the only way to become more successful than you currently are. And along your leadership journey, one of the first things you're going to realize is that leadership is all about serving others. You see, you're not going to grow your organization by fighting your way to the top. You grow your organization by helping others to the top. When you help others, they elevate you to successfully higher levels of leadership. You see, you don't succeed by trying to get the most work out of your marketing partners. You succeed by giving the most help to your marketing partners. And when you start focusing on helping your marketing partners, their performance and their output will absolutely amaze you. Now, I've been passionate about studying leadership since the early 1980s, and I saw the impact that one person with great leadership can have on an organization with Lee Iacocca and Chrysler. I even wrote a paper on leadership at the Yale Business School in 1991, and I've read and listened to and watched hundreds of books and audios and videos on the topic, and I've attended dozens of seminars on leadership. I've also studied leaders firsthand, both corporate and in the field, in the relationship marketing industry for more than 25 years, especially leaders in the field who've earned millions and millions of dollars building large, successful organizations. And in doing all this, 7 constant themes kept on coming up time and time again. 7 themes that great leaders practice all the time. Now, these 7 themes, they've been turned into what I call my 7 universal laws of leadership. Practice these laws, and I promise you, you're going to be successful. There's no way you can't be successful if you practice these 7 laws. I believe these 7 universal laws are essential. I believe they are the essence of all leadership. They're simple, but even one of them can make a difference between success and failure in anything you do. You know, you can make a lot of mistakes as a leader, but if you violate these universal laws, eventually you're going to fail. I believe these laws are that powerful. So by studying and practicing these 7 laws, you're going to learn the following. Number 1, how to build your organization into a winning team. Number 2, how to triple, quadruple, or quintuple your organization size in the next 12 to 24 months. And number 3, how to win your group's loyalty and respect. So I've put together a series of videos on each universal law of leadership. I encourage you to watch these, but most importantly, practice them and watch your business soar to great heights. Thanks for tuning in, and I want to encourage you to keep growing.